Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Tourism and Hospitality Service Management, SOTHSM. Certificate in Tourism Studies, CTS. TS2 Tourism Development, Products, Operations and Case Studies. Block-1 Understanding Tourists and Hosts. Unit-3 Guest-Host Relationship. 3.0 Objectives. Single quote. After reading this unit you will be able to understand the relevance of guest-host relationship in tourism, know the different situations in this regard, and learn about the tension areas. 3.1 Introduction. In the earlier two units we discussed the importance of profiling the tourists and tourist flows. This takes us to another very important aspect in tourism, i.e. the guest-host relationship. A number of issues are involved in this. What kind of reception a tourist will get at a destination? How do the hosts feel about his visit? Will they be friendly? Does the tourist respects local customs and feelings, etc.? They have wider implications on the development of tourism and ought to be taken seriously by the tourism planners and professionals. What should also not be missed here is that this relationship has to be looked upon from both sides, i.e. hosts as well as guests. Generally the host feelings requirements are not a consideration in tourism services or resort development. In some cases they are just secondary considerations. Studies in the nature of tourist motivations, perceptions and attitudes of the locals, hosts, are important in determining, resolving the conflicts between hosts, guests, companies, employees, and land use planners and environmentalists. Hence, this unit familiarizes you with certain aspects of guest-host relationship. 3.2 Some basic factors. Although there are several definitions of tourism, see Units 1 and 2, TSL, there is a common universal understanding about a tourist. A tourist is a temporary visitor who is away from her normal place of residence and work for a change. During this temporary stay, the tourist does not have to work. Beyond this definition, one has to also recognize the fact that tourism involves an interaction with people at the destination. In fact, the interaction starts from the very start of the journey when one meets unknown and strange people who cater to various services. There are the people who act as hosts to the tourist guest. But these are short interactions at the airport, customs, emigrations, etc. The interactions at the destination are or can be of longer duration and they vary as per the location or the type of tourism. Before we go further in analyzing these interactions, let us look at the three elements on whom rests the foundation of tourism. I. Leisure time. E. Discretionary income. E. Local approval. All of these must be operative if touristic activity is to take place. These elements play a role in determining the nature of guest-host relationship. Leisure time is related to work time. In the West, the availability of leisure time is on the increase. For example, the work week has come down from 60 hours to 40 hours and in some cases up to 30 hours a week. Incentive travel, paid leave, etc. encourage people to seek tourism as an attractive option. The availability of leisure time affects the choice of the destination and the activities there. For example, a tourist with interest in monuments and architecture has 2 days in Delhi. The itinerary would include Red Fort, Qutub Minar, Humayun Tomb, Safdarjung Tomb, Lodi Tombs, etc. To see all these he rushes through, and has no time to interact with local people in a meaningful way. Suppose he had more time, the itinerary could have included meeting an art historian, a visit to the archaeological survey and the National Museum, and interacting with people outside the Red Fort or walking through the lanes of Chandni Chowk. In fact, more leisure time encourages long-haul travel and more of stay at the destination. Discretionary income is directly related to the cost of living, work ethic and saving for the future. Attainment of instant pleasure is linked to work goals and money earned is also to be spent. Tourism has emerged as a priority in this regard. Credit cards provide the facility to undertake tourism on credit. The guest-host relationship is also governed by the amount of money spent at a destination. This is particularly the case in simple, underdeveloped or developing societies. For example, many of the subsidiary and informal services provide seasonal jobs, and if high spenders don't turn up the entire year's budget, of the individual or family is affected. Local sanctions determine vacation practices and styles. For example, it may be a fashion to make a trip for some, students may hitchhike and so on. Besides these three elements, factors like domestic and outbound tourism, changes in tastes of tourists, etc., are also taken into account in profiling the guests and hosts. This is necessary to judge the GAPBCTWEEN, the lifestyle and aspirations of the two, and eventually planning for a healthy interaction. However, given the demand-centered model of tourism development in most of the countries, the profiling of the host is consistently ignored. This ignorance may not bear immediate impact, but over a period of time has a lasting impact on the destination. Sanction for tourism should also take into account the impact of the host on the tourist and tourism-related services. Similarly, projecting false destination images about host population shave to be avoided by tourism professionals and promoters. 3.3 Guest host RACTION. Tourism structures the lifestyle of an individual to provide periods of work and recreation. The linking of leisure and mobility leads to recreation in new contexts. Therefore, different types of tourism gives rise to different forms of interaction between hosts and guests. Let us briefly discuss this interaction in 5 types of tourism described by Verleen L. Smith in his introduction to the book Hosts and Guests. 1. Ethnic tourism, often called cultural tourism, but focusing not only on monuments and archaeology but on quaint customs of exotic people like Eskimos, American Indians, tribal communities, their rituals and ceremonies, primitive art, home life and private and public spheres of activity, etc. These tourist targets are often off the beaten path, discovered for visitors who belong to the elite groups of their societies and come at high cost. Such tourism, although limited in numbers, involves an intimate contact between hosts and guests. In the early stages, the impact is not noticed and therefore considered minimal. However, tourism can become the agent of change, as the very features that stimulated tourism can become less and less authentic as local people are influenced not only by tourist money, but also the tourist worldview. Every aspect of local life and tradition can be transformed by the tourist gaze. For example, the monastery festivals in Ladakh are no longer held in winter, the off-season of tourism. Because of commercialization, they are now held in summer when the tourists come. The beneficiaries are no longer the people who pay for the festival but the tourists. 2. Cultural tourism. This includes aspects of local color and the reconstruction of a vanishing lifestyle. Activities at the destination include meals in heritage inns and hotels, folk festivals and fairs, handicrafts, camel and elephant rides, peasant cultures and medieval practices. Here, the host-guest impacts are heightened because rural areas are highly accessible from resort area and the numbers of such tourists is large. They tend to turn the local residents into objects, photographing people, their homes, their work style, touching them to see if they are real, making a bid for the clothes art ornaments that local people wear, recording their music and decoding their culture. As a consequence, local people get divided on the entry of tourists. Those who are employed by the travel trade encourage the penetration of tourism into the most private sphere, but others become resentful of the transformation of their cultures. 3. Historical tourism. Palace, fort or temple museum trails that privilege the past are favored destinations for guided tour itineraries to recreate the lifestyle and key events of the period. Such destinations are generally in well-developed cities and townships where the institutionalized tourism industry operates with special facilities for all grades of tourists who are generally educated. In such situations, host-guest contacts are business-like and impersonal. Here the infrastructure is well developed so that hosts and guests do not feel constrained by each other. The resident-oriented products are well developed and the pressure of tourist-oriented products is not borne by local residents. However, the inflation that results from tourist consumption affects items of daily use, rents, transport and articles of common consumption. 4. Environmental tourism. This goes hand in hand with ethnic tourism. The tourist elite are a traf tilde ed to remote a tilde s. And alien scenery like high mountains, tropical forests, etc. Such townsism uses geographic uniqueness as a resource and explores man-land relationships. For example, tea gardens, vineyards, spice plantations, high-altitude communities and tilde ultras, etc. In such situations, host-guest contacts vary according to the degree to which such envelopment tilde NTS are open to outside interference and tilde a degree to which such is can withstand townsism. The interaction between guests and hosts is therefore winnable and needs local or independent assessment. In many such unique environments, tourists are only allowed day excursions and are kept away from local communities under controlled conditions. This is the case in the Lakshadweep Islands, where Bangaram, an uninhabited island, was selected for tourism development. 5. Recreational tourism. This includes palm-fronted beaches, snow-covered ski slopes, lush green golf courses or natural habitats where wildlife is viewed in communion with nature at its unspoiled best. In addition to the idyllic nature of holiday locations, sporting activities, good food and accommodation, entertainment including gambling and flow shows, all join to the freedom to participate in and away from it all morality. That is why such tourism is called the 4S's sun, sand, sea, sex tourism. See Unit 2 Block 1. For the host-guest relationship, this means I. Price rise, land use. E. Radical economic reorientation. High crime, prostitution, drugs and tourism-related violence. IV. Seasonal labor influx. V. Servant-master relationship tilde between the host and guest. If tourism impacts are being increasingly researched today, this is due to a greater understanding of the magnitude of the tourism industry, the complexity of motivations and expectations, and a variety of cultural responses from the host communities. 3.4 Different situations. In a guest-host relationship, there can be certain situations that emerge at various stages or lead to another situation, and these could be from the point of view of either the guest or the host. Let us look at these diverse situations. From host's point of view, it could be either A. Welcome with all smiles. B. Be cool or aloof. C. Extort money, cheat. D. Be very friendly. Often one situation can lead to another or vice versa. Miles, coolness, extortions, hostility or hostility, friendship, etc. In fact, all these situations depend on a variety of factors depending on the nature of tourism, interaction, tourism impacts, resort development, tourist's profile, host's profile, etc. The aspects to be seen here are 1. Accommodation or toleration or coexistence between visitor, visited. 2. Segregation or social distance or separation between visitor, visited in special tourist areas. 3. Opposition or rejection of the visitor by the visited and a similar discourtesy by the visitor towards the visited. 4. Diffusion, where both visitor, visited adopt or adapt the cultural traits and characteristics of each other. On the international scale, complex relationships between tourists and local people result in increasing artificial tourism constructs, as well as tensions due to 1. Carrying capacity, which relates to the number of tourists in relation to the size of the population. 2. Objectifying physical objects, people and culture, whether as landscape, townscape, ethnic group, lifestyle, historical artifacts, recreational bases and natural resources. In public rituals, the stress of such objectification is less than in case where private lives and ceremonies are being observed, as for example in visits to cremation grounds. 3. The spatial and temporal packing of the tourist gaze, whether it demands excursions, one night or extended stays, instant or prolonged exposure, as well as the depth of the observer's involvement. 4. The organization of mass services to satisfy the tourist gaze. This involves not only the private and public sectors but also the role of multinationals, big with small companies, local vs outsiders and the local people with the tourist organization. 5. The economic and social differences between the tourists and local people. These differences act both as an attraction and a deterrent. 6. The effect of tourism on pre-existing production and consumption patterns. 7. The demand for a particular type and standard of service, a demand that becomes more and more exclusive with the inclusive tour segment. This includes restaurants, bars, souvenir shops, travel and transport agencies, hotels and airports. 8. The transformation of the natural aura of the destination into a cliché by over viewing or being turned into an image of itself. For example, Southeast Asia is imaged as a region known for its hospitality. Girls and brothels are recommended to package tour operators. Hosts' attitude towards tourists is governed by direct experiences, images and perceptions, or stereotypes. These could be in relation to economic benefits and social or cultural exchanges. The composition of tourists, tourism, services and the nature of resort development are other major considerations in this regard. For example, let us take a situation where water scarcity is there in the area. The locals do not get water to irrigate their fields, but ample water is provided at the tourist resort. Such a situation can lead to hostility of the locals. Let us analyze the relationship keeping in view the economic, social or cultural aspects. 3.4.1 Economic. Where tourism is integrated with the domestic economy, it does benefit local and national economies. But where it is in the hands of foreign investors, the benefits are siphoned off. The question of the leakage of foreign exchange, or the multiplier effect of tourist spending, will also vary from case to case. The host-guest relationship will therefore depend on how great the benefit from tourism is to the local people. For example, there is active resistance to international tourism in Goa because although Goa earns 60% of the foreign exchange for India, this money is not retained in the state and does not benefit the local people. Moreover, where economic disparities exist between tourists and local people, local resistance to tourism is based on hostility to certain touristic practices like bride buying in Hyderabad etc. Where a monopoly of tourism exists, the economic impact of seasonality is often severe and leads to seasonal unemployment. Tourism is often described as a feast or famine industry. It is sensitive to external factors like economic recession, inflation, political and diplomatic relations as well as cultural values. The tourist wants a bargain, but the local residents want to maximize profits. Tourism has been promoted as a vehicle for peace, goodwill, international understanding, and national identity formation. When tourism is at the fledgling state, there is local control over its earnings and expansion. As its scale increases, the control is transferred from local to central governments, which alone are empowered to compete internationally. Because they offer financial incentives and concessions to hotel chains, travel agents and tour operators. Only governments can raise loans and grants from international agencies and other intergovernmental loans. Tourism is then developed over the heads of local people and often at the cost of traditional economic activity like agriculture, fishing, toddy tapping etc. In many cases, tourism develops neo-colonial aspects, where profits from Tories flow out of the country because of foreign control. In some cases, privatization has helped to retain local control, but in India the private and the state sectors are increasingly coming under foreign control. Apart from the cultural implications of large-scale tourism, neo-colonial control brings in objectives that are outward-looking, denying opportunities to local experts AC local priorities. For the guest-host relationship, this spells trouble and tension, since the native population, at both intellectual and popular levels, is not carried along. Acts of terrorism and provocation against tourists, or a physical threat to their security, can result from such patterns of tourism development. Secondly, the arts and crafts or the souvenir trade, while it enlarges the market for such produce, either does not benefit the producer or it trinketizes or trivializes native art by lucking it into a take away. The producer is also the linked from the traditional users of his artisanship and is replaced by mass-produced goods. The impact of tourism is very seasonal on the handicraft persons, and if tourism is interrupted for any reason, they are completely ruined, as can be seen in Kashmir. 3.4.2 Social and cultural. Modernization is relentlessly making inroads into backward regions and the pockets of Poverty around the world. Radios, cassettes and cable TV have spread the message of the New World Order far and wide. Cultural oneness is evident in the fast food joints, video parlors, coffee houses, mechanics and repair shops. Do tourists cause change in the hosts' perceptions and attitudes, or is this the result of the media invasion? The impact of cultural changes in the guest-host relationship will depend largely on I. The importance and extent to which the tourist wants to remain within his tourist bubble. E. The extent to which local youth can earn easy money. E. The toleration level of local people to unsensitive tourist behavior in body, language, dress and tone of voice. For example, like nudism, recreational clothes and semi-undressed women, smoking and necking in public places which are unacceptable to traditional societies. IV. The role of the media and guidebooks which stress cultural relativism as a bridge to international understanding without realizing that relativism works in two directions, not only from the guest to the host, I, but also from the host to the guest. V. The emergence of national stereotypes which transform guests and hosts into objects for each other. V. Alternatives to mainstream tourism have not been able to solve the problems of unequal power nor been able to solve the unequal power and economic relations between guests and hosts, particularly in the poorer destinations of Asia, Africa and Latin America. V. As tourism moves from the front regions, pleasure peripheries of Europe, of the world to the back regions, pleasure peripheries created for European tourists as non-European countries, the cultural consequences of such movements become extremely volatile. 3.5 Role of numbers and tourist types. Many writers consider tourism a mixed blessing. Whilst the tourist industry creates jobs and incomes, a large volume of tourist arrivals can become a physical and social burden. Therefore, a destination can use the type of tourism to control the number of tourists for encouraging a healthy guest-host relationship. For example, Bhutan does not allow more than 1,000 tourists per year, because the Bhutanese feel that a large number of tourists will be a physical and social burden. Similarly, an explorer type of tourist is very limited. Such tourists are well educated and more keen to participative tourism, accommodating local norms, food, lifestyle. Yet, they bolster such participation with packaged goods from home. A consequence of this attitude is the garbage and impacts tourists leave behind them, which then impinge on local norms. The elite tourist is also adaptive, but dependent on tours arranged by the travel agent who will charge them large sums of money, very little of which will percolate to local service personnel. The demonstration effect of such tourists is often damaging to local norms and lifestyles. Because tours are organized for the elites, masses follow in their wake. The offbeat or hippie tends to adapt, but is not seen as of much economic benefit. While such tourists adapt well, they tend to create hippie trails along which they become a kind of mafia and begin to exercise control over locations. As for example, the hippie run, flea market, in Anjuna, Goa. Hosts resent such control and disregard for local laws and customs, and become hostile to such an invasion. However, there are some who just want to get away from the touristic bubble, crowds in major destinations because they are looking for a highly personalized experience. They tolerate local lifestyle for their experience. The incipient mass tourist is a regular visitor who seeks the Western environment in accommodation, food and transport, usually traveling alone or in small groups or guided tours, and because tourism costs money, such tourists expect Western amenities regardless of local resources or experience. Mass tourism indicates a steady flow of big numbers. It is seasonal and attracted by resorts. It has middle-class prices and values built in, and such tourists expect what they have paid for. They want the tourist bubble, without which they cannot survive. The size of such tourism, including jumbo jets, luxury coaches and high-rise hotels, makes them very visible, like the ex-colonial, very exclusive and apart from the hosts. This type of tourist creates the most stressful contract with the host, because he demands privileges at the cost of the host and expects the host to adapt to his culture and value system. Because these inputs are essential for the creation of the tourist bubble, Here we must remember that the guest-host relationship is not just to be looked upon from the point of view of international tourists and hosts only. The various types and situations are equally applicable in the case of domestic tourists. Showing off, throwing your weight, arrogance, eve-teasing, disrespect for culture and customs are some areas that create hostile situations at destinations. The offenders may be a few, but the bad image which they leave behind is attributed to the region they hail from. 3.6 Relevance. The guest-host relationship is a very sensitive area and needs to be researched before a policy can be evolved. In most cases, a trial and error method prevails with hit and miss. Stories of the consequences of tourism abound. There are two aspects of this relationship: the host expectation, the guest expectation. 1. Income. 1. Stranger, other. 2. Employment. 2. Resources and attractions. 3. Consumer goods. 3. Transport and infrastructure. 4. Social interaction. 4. Transport and infrastructure. 5. Respect and dignity. 5. Safety, security. 6. Culture, private and public. 6. Curiosity and novelty. 7. Living within a community. 7. Value for money. 8. Tourism consciousness. 8. Cultural interaction. If one studies the list, one can very easily see how the guest-host relationship has to be bundled at the policy level before tourism defeats the very purpose for which it is liked. The reason problem areas like volume, type of tourist, type of tourism, and the nature of the tourism industry have to be determined by local and national participation is that both the guest and host are likely to be safeguards of the industry and the bureaucracy. Governments and the industry looks only at the bottom line and not at the human elements that go to make for a fruitful bang of civilizations. As culture, on the one hand, becomes more homogenized, and on the other, less Eurocentric, resistance to Western-style tourism is going to increase both for inbound and outbound tourism. Unless this consciousness is communicated both to the tourist and the people at the destination, a healthy guest-host relationship will hover around a relativistic. As tourism expands, problems increase, but solutions are also emerging. Between confusion and boredom, there must be an evaluation of the level at which the human organism can absorb novelty, complexity, and information. If tourism is defined functionally and symbolically rather than universally, we can all understand how it relates to our lives and institutions, and how we are enriched by its purpose and meaning, both as guests and hosts. Concepts like alternative tourism and sustainable tourism are a clear indication that the guest-host interaction is not empathetic. Such concepts also recognize that in the New World Order it is the market forces that are going to determine human relations. However, at destinations where informal sectors service tourists, such forces overtake any rational model of cultural exchange by commoditizing elements that are strange people rather than bringing them together. The very idea of the tourist as a guest is our position, and the destination as host mystifies the monetization of aspects of a nation's and tradition that have never before been packaged or consumed at a price. There is an urgent requirement that the development methodology begins to democratize itself to include studies of the host population before tourism projects are located at a destination. 3.7 Summary. Guest-host relationships vary as per the location, impacts, types of tourism and tourists. Host perceptions, experiences and images. Generally, host feelings are ignored in tourism promotion and development. However, such ignoring can have drastic impact on a destination, unless tourism is founded and practiced on a healthy and friendly guest-host relationship. The very purpose of tourism stands defeated. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.